Welcome back to another video. Thank you for joining me. I have some crazy, wild information here in this video with Chris Larsen and Gary Gensler. What he talks about is banks having to give up some of their ownership to get involved with Ripple. Excuse me, the other way around. Ripple having to give up equity in their company to get into this traditional banking system. All right, it really speaks for itself. And then an update on the lawsuit from a lawyer. Very good stuff. Let's get into it.
So Chris, how do you plan on distributing Ripple? I know part of it is set aside for the founders, and then the rest is given out to basically encourage people to use Ripple, or?
Ripple Labs can give it to business development partners, to consumers broadly, to people globally. So two things that we've been doing which we like is we've been incenting market makers with XRP forgivable loans. It's essentially the vehicle that we're currently using. But we feel that incents, say, big currency traders, high-frequency traders.
Big currency traders, high-frequency traders. High-frequency trading is more than 50%. It's like algorithmic AI trading. And these are big multi-million-dollar sums of money. You know what that means for the price of XRP. For big sums of money to be transacted efficiently, the token needs a high price.
To actually be active market makers on Ripple, say big currency traders, high-frequency traders, that provides liquid markets. That's good for everybody. Gives them an incentive in the long-term success of the network. That provides liquid markets. That's good for everybody. Gives them an incentive in the long-term success of the network. In some ways, just exactly what Visa did, is they sort of gave out ownership of Visa to key banks to participate in the system.
Did you hear that? Exactly what Visa did, giving out key parts of the system so that they can participate. And then listen to what Gary Gensler has to say here. I'm just going to play this back one more time because it's that wild.
Network. In some ways, just exactly what Visa did, is they sort of gave out ownership of Visa to key banks to participate in the system.
Imagine Ripple giving out that escrow. Don't forget, half of the supply, 50 billion tokens, are locked in escrow, right? And there's never been a statement on what could be done with those. I'm sure Ripple does have complete custody over those tokens, though, and the ability for them to be transferred to the IMF or some central entity is totally feasible.
Central monopolist with another central monopolist. A lot of commercial banks aren't terribly excited about that. Maybe you're going to have to give some ownership. Maybe you'll have to give 50% of your ownership to the 20 banks.
Why would central banks, commercial banks, allow the new kid on the block to steal their customers? Why would they allow blockchain technology to just come and take over the industry without getting a piece of the pie? And Gary Gensler himself, the SEC chairman, the guy in the lawsuit, is saying right here, maybe to participate, they have to give up part of ownership.
That are now, part of this. I mean, there are other ways to build incentive systems. Maybe you put a native token in there, and you give them the native token. So there may be other incentive ways. Monopolist.
In some ways, just exactly what Visa did, is they sort of gave out ownership of Visa.
Visa was a pioneer in the early 2000s, 90s, payment pioneer. PayPal did wonderful stuff. MoneyGram even at a time. Ripple is the next innovation. You remember the early days of Amazon? Everyone doubted them. Amazon stock even went down 96% at one point, but they persevered. And Ripple has that same potential to be the internet of payments. And now for the lawsuit. Let's check in with Jeremy Hogan.
What's all this mean? First, we can see from the pleadings that Ripple is very confident that it can win on the Section 5 violation issue, and specifically on the "there is no contract here" issue that it spent a lot of real estate talking about in its brief. And maybe it's confident for good reason, as the SEC honestly really struggled to deal with that issue in its reply brief. I was really honestly surprised by how much it struggled. Second, Ripple says there was something shameful in the emails it was finally able to get from the SEC, but the emails will really be relevant only to Ripple's fair notice defense, which Ripple is wanting to go to a jury trial. Now, will it go to a jury trial? I don't know at this time. Ripple cites a case which apparently says that the issue is a jury issue, but that goes against what I initially believed, so I'll withhold giving an opinion on that until we see how the SEC responds in a couple weeks. But either way, the summary judgment issue on whether XRP is a security or not will be decided first. Except, and this is a remote possibility for me, but it's possible that the judge for some reason looks at the issues in the Section 5 violation and decides that a jury trial is necessary to decide them. Now, this would be a disaster because it ruins the early 2023 timeline for resolution, but I honestly don't see it happening. I'm just covering my butt by bringing it up, to be honest. But speaking of butts, since this is crazy speculation time, what about a resolution of the case? Well, I'm not going to hold back here. All the cards are on the table at this point. All major issues have been decided by the judge. The emails have been handed over. The parties know exactly how strong each side's position is. If the SEC doesn't want those emails made public, between now and the end of the year is the time. Now, as I've mentioned before, Ripple would certainly love to move on from this case, and there's only one thing it requires. Let's hear it from Ripple's general counsel himself.
We've said publicly since day one that this case settles if the SEC makes clear that Ripple sales and distributions of XRP and XRP's trading in the secondary market does not constitute a security. If they're willing to acknowledge that, the case settles, and settles very, very quickly.
And there you have it. And so we can safely assume that the SEC has so far not agreed to settle with the stipulation that Ripple's future sales of XRP would not be considered sales of securities. And if you think about it, Ripple really has no wiggle room on this issue, so it's up to the SEC to really decide if the case settles or not. And in that light, the worse the litigation goes for the SEC, the better the chances are. And so you have to think that at this moment in time, if I was the SEC, I'd be thinking very hard about whether this is the hill I wanted to die on. Bad facts make bad law, and there are a couple big pitfalls in this case for the SEC, but it's decision time for them, and we'll probably know shortly. But back to the case, there are still two things I'm waiting for and want to see. First, there's the SEC's response to Ripple's reply brief in regard to horizontal commonality. That will be filed November 15, and those will be the final briefs before the case goes to the judge for a decision. It won't happen, but technically the judge could rule on the case on November 16 if she wanted. But the last thing I want to see, and that I think could really push this case in Ripple's favor, is the amicus brief from Attorney John Deaton. Whether you and I bought XRP expecting profits from the efforts of Ripple is still a major issue in the case and has been brought up in the pleadings already, but I haven't talked about it yet because I'm waiting to see what 75,000 XRP purchasers have to say on the issue. I'd say that's.
And there we are with the case. Both sides have been discussed, and now it's just time for a motion to be made and for a judgment to be decided. Thank you again for joining me. Subscribe if you're new, and if you're still watching, comment turkey below by watching the full video. It supports the channel, so I'm really grateful for that. And if you did listen to that, if you heard me right now, comment turkey so I know you watched the full video, because I do appreciate it. God bless you guys. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your families.